Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. Today, we are going to be talking about neurodiversity and inclusivity. And if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you might be thinking, I feel like we've talked about this. And that's because I think a lot of these conversations, although they start as really separate topics, they end up coming back to a lot of the same themes. And I think in last week's episode, we spent so much time talking about so much with like inclusivity and representation. And then towards the end of the episode, if you listened, we were kind of like, also, there's a lot of stuff with representation that you can't see. And we didn't necessarily have time to like get to really dig into it. So I think this is a perfect follow-up to then be able to talk about neurodiversity and inclusivity. But before we open up the big brave question, let's give you the lay of the land of who's in the conversation, what voices you're hearing. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sarah Heeter. I am the host of the Big Brave Business podcast. And I also am the CEO and founder of a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox Media.
And I'm Anna Xavier. I'm a creative multilingual, and I am a podcast strategist for women multilinguals and underserved communities.
Well, I'm Angela Johnson, pronouns she, her. I am a trauma-informed marketing and messaging strategist for multi-passionate rebels. So for folks who can never just pick one thing, I get it. So it's I'm really happy to be part of this conversation.
I love that. Great intros. I feel so excited to talk to you and for us to be in a community together to talk about this. So let's go ahead and open this can of worms, shall we? The big question we're digging into today is, how does neurodiversity shape entrepreneurship, and what support systems are needed to create truly inclusive business spaces? Those are two really big questions. Where shall we go from here?
Angela, I feel like probably have more to. I feel like I tend to have a lot of clients who are onto the neurodivergent spectrum, but I try to figure out ways to work with them. I don't have a trauma-informed background, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts first, Angela.
Well, sure. I mean, there's so much, like, how much time do we have? Because
Right.
This is a really broad, like really big topic. And trauma-informed practices are also neuro-affirming practices. And so there's a really healthy, crossover there. In order to create truly inclusive spaces, if we're just looking at this through the lens of neurodiversity, it can be tricky because not everybody, in my experience, I've been working with entrepreneurs for over 17 years. The number of people, now that I know what neurodivergence is, and I've like late diagnosed person myself, it's like, oh, so many things make so much more sense now. Like, had I known there was language for this, had I known that there's a reason for these behaviors, the ways that I think about business, the ways that I get really frustrated with business, but also seeing that this is a lot of my clients over the years, like so many of my clients. So back to what I was saying of, it's really hard to know if someone is neurodiverse, because a lot of these traits can be highly masked, especially in women and people assigned female at birth. And it's still such a taboo topic. It's still things like lack of consistency or lack of follow through it's so often labeled as, oh, you're just being lazy and you just push yourself harder. And so it's challenging. It's very challenging. And so to have a truly inclusive environment in any business or organization, when we're looking at that through the lens of neurodiversity, I think it's tough, because it's also, do I want to share openly with people that I am a neurodivergent person because of the stigma and judgment, which I received a lot of, like, oh, I don't know, you're like, I don't know what that means. And that must, like, people don't trust my expertise, but not everyone, some people. So it's tough. Anyway, I want to pause there and then bounce it off back to you two.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am a twin, and so growing up, my sister, she tends to be more on the type A personality. She doesn't go up to in space as we call it, right? Like get distracted with all the things. And growing up, I realized that I thought something was wrong with me, and that's something that I find with clients. There's always that comment that comes time and time again if they're entrepreneurs or creatives. Oh, but I should, but I have to, or like I'm not committed enough and I'm falling behind. And I always think about when I was growing up, and I'm originally from Portugal, and it was always this is the way to teach, this is the way to do things. And I feel like so many entrepreneurs feel traumatized by maybe the education system or feel like they're less than, and that shows up in how they show up because it's so prevalent that we feel like even though we're working so hard, we're rocking and rolling and achieving amazing things, but the one month that we are less consistent, we stick to that idea that like, oh, here I go again, failing.
Yep.
And it's really interesting to me when I'm working with clients, and I try to get as informed as possible, but I try to ask them like, hey, how do you best work? And even as entrepreneurs, when we have vendors, when we have collaborators, when we have clients, we really have to ask those questions. Hey, tell me about how you best work, and try to accommodate for that. And I feel like sometimes I'm nudging coaching clients, be like, I know it's hard. This is very important to you, and trying to figure out like in the weight of what is happening, how do you weight as a creative, maybe the state of the world, and that impacts you, and maybe you get less focus time. There's just so much that I feel like as entrepreneurs, as females primarily, we feel like we should. It's just such a big weight in our shoulders. And I feel like we have to be doing more work in communicating that, yes, this is just another way of creating content, of creating our business, and leaning into that is so important, especially with social media, because it can feel like there's that lighter side, especially on TikTok, right? Like everybody was like, oh, it's just my ADHD. But like the reality is we still get stuck with those like ancient shoulds that like we just still feel like whenever we are falling behind is just the end of the world. And normalizing that there's a gazillion different ways to create. How can you do it? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that to me has been important for me, for my business to grow and thrive, and also to help and allow clients to have that conversation to be like, actually, how do you want to create content? I think that's a very important conversation that can be like baby steps, and just allowing ourselves every single time to get there.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think my experience and kind of perspective is very much based on the US because it's the only country I've ever lived in. But I do hear a lot of US based entrepreneurs talk about the pipeline of public education to corporate jobs, 9-to-5s, and then entrepreneurship kind of existing outside of that sort of pipeline. And for some people, that's why they pursue entrepreneurship. But for some people, it's just like a newfound freedom that exists in entrepreneurship. But that pipeline of public school to like 9-to-5, they are like trying to force people into a mold of kind of drones or like worker bees that mimic a specific system, fulfill certain tasks in certain timelines, in certain ways, and then kind of teaching those, I'll call them skills, but that like way of work into being able to then be a worker bee in 9-to-5. And I think the opportunity that exists in entrepreneurship is for neurodivergence is certainly to be able to do things differently, do things how you want to do them. Like you said about like, how do you want to create content, but also what method of communication works for you, what time of day works for you, how many hours a day works for you, how do you want to build offers, how do you want to consume offers, like all of those things get to be more in your control. But also there is like, in total freedom, there's also like a lack of structure. And it's sort of like, I hear some people talk about how entrepreneurship's not for everyone because, and they go into sort of that like shame area that you were sort of indicating, Anna, of like, you need to be a self-starter, you need to be able to manage yourself, you need to be able to set priorities, you have to be really driven and committed. And if you don't have that sort of self-starter, go-getter mentality, then it might not be for you. But I think the conversation is not just about whether you have like fortitude of character, but it's also, does your brain literally work that way, where you existing in your own structure, not a lack of structure, creating structure for yourself, does that work for you or not? Because if it doesn't, this is going to be hard.
Yeah. I'm thinking back because I'm 47, I was late diagnosed, 45 and 46, two different diagnoses. And the first thought that I had, and there was a lot of grief with this too, of like, I have judged the hell out of myself for decades for just not being able to get my shit together. And I've created some awesome things in my business. I've been doing this for over 17 years. Like, I'm very proud of that. Yet I would always see where I would fall short or always feel behind, or just have this question in the back of my mind all the time of like, I have paid so much in coaching and I can see it works for other people. And I would try it and I would get the opposite result, or I would just die of boredom and just thinking, what is wrong with me? I had no language for what was happening. And so rather than blaming the system, which is where capitalism, all the things that are fed into any sort of business, then it was really easy to blame myself of like, what's wrong with me? But now that there's language for it, it's like, oh, oh, this is what's happening. And there's still layers of grief and rage and just the lack of understanding, especially with how do these traits present themselves in women and people assigned female at birth. It's very different. And that it's really unfortunate because there's so many women coming into their 40s and beyond going, oh, I just thought there was something truly flawed. Like there was something wrong with me. I just couldn't quite crack the code. And it was like, no, there's actually, the system was literally not designed for us. There's no way we can make it fit. So we have to reinvent the system. We have to reimagine the way this is done. And that can feel really confronting and scary because we live in a world that is built on capitalism and white supremacy and all the things that are intermingled. Like, how dare, especially women, how dare us start to poke the bear and go, this is actually not working. There's another way to do this. So it can be really challenging and also really creative and fun and freeing, but there's a lot of stigma to overcome with this.
Yeah. And Angela, you're saying something that reminded me because I was that person too. I was like coaching and paying for all the courses. And I'm like, this is so hard. Like, why? And I'm someone who's very honest, very authentic. I'm like, I will not, to me, to create a layer of like what the shoulds be, like just by default, that's not me. And I remember some of these courses, I would start conversations or I would do kind of one-on-one with some of the people that were taking the courses that I was, or part of other conversations. And I was like, are you struggling? Because I'm struggling. And sometimes you being the first person to say like, I'm struggling, I don't think this is right for me. Like, how is it working for you? And removing that veil of expectation of like having it all together really helps other people realize that actually it's nothing is wrong with me. Actually, let me go deeper. And I remember having these conversations. There's a big course creator in the online space, and anyone who does course probably knows who that person is. And that person creates content for neurotypical people. Yet the audience that that person normally attracts is a huge percentage of neurodivergent. And I started realizing with more and more and more conversations that I was having for my own course as I was creating it, I realized like, oh, holy cow, there's more people than I thought that actually never start the course, that never launch it because they felt so overwhelmed by the process. And all of this got me to thinking how we don't empower ourselves to ask ourselves questions about this and kind of like put our like detective hat and go, okay, beyond what is being air quotes like sold to me, what cues can I get from this creator, from maybe some of their processes, some of the things. And so this is like, as an entrepreneur, we need to actually start, it's not making that emotional decision and asking ourselves those questions. Hang on a second. I love the results. I love the vibes. I love all of that, but will the process be right for me? And I think that once I started asking myself that question, and I asked myself and told clients, hey, before you commit to this or before you go on to that process, for instance, that creator that is doing all of those things, how do you feel like they are best at it? And normally it's the person who is really good at sticking to a schedule, sticking to a big plan and executing it all. And when you start asking those follow-up questions, you realize that maybe you weren't asking them and you weren't like relying so much on your judgment and your intuition. And I think that as creatives, as neurodivergent people who just have a different approach to learning, we have to ask ourselves, like, what feels right to me? And we, through the education system especially, is like, we're all formatted to think in one way because it's harder to create all of these systems for these people with different needs. And I just like realized that it was like a pivotal moment for myself. And I'm curious if it was for any of you too. There was a moment where you're like, wait, let me question what's going on. And then that just was like, oh, wow, like one of the decisions that made life easier for you as an entrepreneur, for instance.
1,000%. Yeah. I mean, I look at anything I buy now and one, ask myself, do I have the capacity to actually follow this through? And oftentimes it's no, I do not. This is bright, sparkly, shiny object syndrome, and I'm going to forget about this in 24 hours. So I now have a new process for myself. Before buying anything, I wait 24 hours. And if I can't even remember the next day, I'm like, okay, no problem. But if it is something that sticks with me, then asking some other follow-up questions, like for any sort of course, like I do not watch replays. I have a really hard time. Like I like to have live energy. I want to be able to ask questions. And so I don't like evergreen courses, like for me to how I consume content. And so I also have a hard time creating those because other brains like mine, it's like, they're going to lose interest. So how can I create my own courses with some live components or ways that people can have some more interaction and ask those questions? So those are all some things that I've considered, but yeah, I think it's just to echo what you said, if like we have to advocate for ourselves, but I think it can be challenging with that. I remember the first time someone asked me, well, what are some of the accommodations that would help you? And I was like, I have no idea because I have spent over 40 years just making shit work.
Right.
And it's never worked. So can you give me a list of some examples of accommodations? Like, I don't even know what to ask for.
Right.
And then I started really seeing like, oh, that makes sense. Like as an example, I did a master's program, which was kind of a bizarre experience, but testing anxiety, it was nothing I really had on my undergrad or things, but it was significant. And I just thought, this is wild. Like, I don't know where all the information went in my brain for like quizzes or tests or things like that. Or I really struggle with verbal directions. And so asking professors, like, anything you say, I need to have it in writing as well, because I will take notes, but it's just, I need to see it. And so, I mean, those are two simple examples, but knowing that that's what I require so that I can actually be successful in something was pretty eye-opening. Very simple things, but I had no idea that I could even ask for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings up two things that I wanted to say in answer to your question, Anna, of light bulb moments. I can think of two for me, and they're directly related to what you're talking about, Angela. And that is, one is my kids and one is a specific client. So I could probably go so far as to say, so I have 3 stepkids all over 20. I could say that all 3 of them, their brains work in unique ways. Oldest is a girl, so, well, a woman, because she's over 20. But and so she, as far as masking, it's funny because what I was originally going to say is the 2 boys are definitely neurodivergent in their own ways. But I do think that, especially since you mentioned specifically like elevated anxiety and how that presents and impacts the way that you functioned in that program, right? And I think for her, that's definitely like a big part of it. And since you specifically mentioned that masking in women and assigned female at birth is like significantly harder for us to navigate and to like notice, right? So I think I have to say all 3 of them in their own ways. But the younger 2 are both men. And it feels so weird to say they're my boys. But anyway, the middle one in particular really struggled in school. The younger one made friends more easily, not easily, but more easily. He played sports, etc. Like, seemed like he masked better during his education. The middle one, though, struggled with grades always. I was not part of his life when he was really little, but there was a level of like assessment that was done. And at the time, even just 15 to 20 years ago, there was so much less information available about how many ways it can look to be neurodivergent. Like the neurodiversity is real. There's a lot of different, it's not just like, can you check a box or not? Like, okay. So I think unfortunately that made his school experience significantly more challenging. Now, by the time I came into his life, what I knew to be true is that he was extremely smart. I watched him learn very quickly, especially when it came to games. Very, very smart with board games, very, very smart with video games, and a fantastic teacher. I knew it wasn't like a learning disability that he was not capable of learning the material in the classroom. That was not what was happening, right? That was affecting his grades. His processing is different than we expect his processing to be. And it is not malicious, and it is not lazy, and it is not, right? Like it's none of those like shame induced things, right? It's none of that. So then we don't need to have a label for it. We just need to understand that his brain is going to operate differently in different circumstances. And that gave me empathy for every other human on the planet. When there is something going on with another person that I'm interacting or engaging with, my assumption is not laziness, lack of care, disrespect, etc. My assumption is there's probably something else at play that influenced this social interaction. So like down to if somebody's late for a meeting, I'm not going to make an immediate assumption that they don't care, or if they have disregard for my time, or this is consistently a problem with this person. They're always late. They're disrespectful. Probably not, right? Like there could be 1,000 reasons to explain, and it doesn't have to be neurodivergence, but it could be, right? Like not everybody's good at a schedule. It's just not going to work for everybody. So I think like that kind of helps. So do you want to be able in your business to serve people who might not be able to show up at 2:00 on the dot? They might need to show up at 2:05. Do you want to be able to serve people like that in your business? And if the answer is no, that's your own issue. But like, if the answer is yes, there's still room for them in my business, then we need to accommodate that, right? And so I think with my stepsons seeing this later diagnosis, like you talked about, what the grief in me that I can really relate to in what you were saying is like how much easier their life paths would have been both in school and after school with understanding how their own brain works. Because what do you mean you have to show up in social situations? What do you mean you have to show up to school? What do you mean you have to show up to work and hold a job? Like these are all so many complicated things. And if you don't know how your own brain works, how are you supposed to function? So yes, not knowing the like accommodations that are available, I think, gosh, what a blessing that we have so many more resources now for kids to be able to learn the answer to that question in second grade instead of learning the answer to that question at 40.
I'm sitting here just nodding the whole time of just how much easier things could have been. It's astounding. I hear people when they have the resistance of like, oh, you don't need a label. And I don't, like, I agree. It's like labels can oftentimes be really harmful, but I think what we're talking about is having a shared language of, oh, this is actually what's going on. And it's not because I'm lazy or this or whatever, I love how you said like the shame-based languages. It's like, there's actually something underneath this. And so to approach that with some curiosity and compassion, that's a completely different reality than just constant judgment, both self-judgment and outer judgment, that I can't fit in this box, that the box was designed poorly to begin with, let alone for neurodivergent folks.
Yeah, and there's always a part of me whenever the more internet I consume about all the things, right? We get into like a rabbit hole, and I feel like as someone who's 36, I'm like, oh my gosh, I always think about the potential of, and especially look back at those early years and those kids who were just needing different accommodations, who needed all of those things. And to think about like, wow, like back in the day, where would they be today had they been able to understand that like there's so much potential. You just need something that is not the norm, but you're awesome. And I feel like the internet has many bad things, but so many good things. I find that people finding community and being surrounded, especially in entrepreneurship, surrounding yourself with people that share language and that have that shared behavior. Yes, you may be derouted many times. I find myself with my girlfriends, we're like, oh, oops, squirrel brain, we ended up somewhere different. But what a joy to be able to say we're making our own paths as entrepreneurs, and we're finally creating in a way that feels awesome and authentic, and the internet is enabling that, is allowing us to find better tools. And again, that rebel side of the neurodivergent was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go ahead and try something different. And suddenly, like, the internet is like, let's amplify that and just make that something that is very, very normalized, right? Like, we look around and we're like, yep, that's the path I want to go for. And that's your tribe. Go ahead and pick the people in your life that are going to be helping you grow and amplify your message and amplify just that way of existing. And I'm like, many bad things, but I'll say I wish I found that side of the internet sooner, where it's just so normalized. So I will just always say the podcast, in the YouTube, the internet in general, made this a completely different experience for everyone online, I find.
There are a lot more resources out there.
Absolutely.
Even in the last year or two than there were 5 years ago. So yeah, and it's really helpful. I love the experience of even like this conversation, connecting with other neurodivergent people. It's like we just get it. We can just go right in and have a deep conversation. And it's like, please don't make me have small talk. Like I cannot. I will if I really have to, but I want to get right to it. And I mean, that's another example of just wondering like, why am I so socially awkward? Or why can't I just whatever, but noticing my interactions with people my entire life, but again, not having any language for that until the last couple of years. And it was like, oh, there's actually something to this. I'm not just making stuff up. I'm not just quote being too sensitive or whatever it is. And it's really reassuring to know that there is language for this and other people are experiencing the same thing.
I'm curious because you were asked the question about accommodations and you were like, what are my choices? And so I'm curious, I think we've kind of hinted at some things like about scheduling live components versus replays. I mentioned like about a schedule and being late, but I'm curious, like what other accommodations as business owners can we take into consideration for how we're serving clients, especially without having to have disclosure? Like, what are some ways that we can create an inclusive business by taking those accommodations into consideration without even needing to have an example of someone needing to ask for it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say the first thing, I mean, there's so many things because there's so much, everyone is different. I think as a business owner is approaching things with the lens of curiosity. The second, I assume this is how people consume information, or this is what people need, or just because my brain needs information a certain way, then I assume that other people's brains are going to need information that other way. So asking a lot more questions, engaging with a lot more curiosity. And just like what you said earlier, Sarah, of if someone's face is doing something on a Zoom or they show up late or whatever, is let go of the judgment, because we have no idea. We have no idea what's happening for that person. Or if someone's video, like in a group call, is always off, it's like, oh, they must not be engaged. It's like, they might just be completely overstimulated that day. And being on video is too exhausting. And so providing options for people, like I remember this was years ago, but I had a guest speaker and he was talking about networking, and this individual started saying something about like, and for all of you who don't have your video on, we're here to see each other and da 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 da. And I was like, oh, they didn't know that I given permission of like, hey, if you don't have the energy to be on video, then don't be on video. And I understand that we want to see and interact with people. It's like how our nervous systems become co-regulators. We want to see and connect with people. and to not make the assumption of, oh, that's unprofessional because people aren't showing their video on a Zoom call. And it's like, no, let's just stop with the assumption. So that would be one place where I would start, is a lot more curiosity, asking a lot more questions, and then check yourself every time you're making assumptions. I have some other specific things, but I want to see what else is in the room too.
I'm curious more to hear about you. Normally, I just ask a lot of questions with clients and probe a bit more and offer solutions, but sometimes I feel like it requires sometimes more work from you, the provider, just being sure, again, because it will also, I find, give you the results that everybody is looking for, right? The more invested you are in creating an environment that the client can, or the collaborators can feel like they can interact and can ask and be more involved. I find that sometimes like leading really helps, but there was one that I forgot. But just basically, I feel like checking in and keeping tabs on how I personally like connecting with clients and understanding what is going on beyond what we're working on, and understand what phase of life they are, what is happening, so that it allows me to have more compassion when we don't hit a deadline, when maybe a lot of things were expected to be done and they're not, right? I feel like leading with curiosity and compassion and just being more plugged in. I feel like personally, that's just what works for me, is just to make sure that the client understands that this is not just transactional. I'm here to support you beyond this. I'm here, your best cheerleader. I'm there to support you to find all the ways that I can help. And to me, that I think that leaves the person on the other side more at ease to themselves share, hey, this is actually not working for me. I didn't know that this was not going to work. Or then I realized that that's not how I work best, or in the phase of where I'm at right now, this is not working. So I find that those for me work really well.
Mm-hmm. I think going along the same lines with that is allowing flexibility.
Absolutely.
I've been preaching for years of like, there's no such thing as a one size fits all formula. And there's so much of that in business of like, well, if you just do this, you just do this, then you're going to have X, Y, Z result. And so I think normalizing that as well of here, I'm going to, because I do a lot of teaching and I like to have systems and models and frameworks for things. But every single time I teach that, it's like, well, here, let me teach you the steps. So when you know the steps, then you can rearrange them and break the rules. But here are the components. And now you get to adjust them for the way that your brain works. So I think it's also about how we're presenting solutions of, this is not the end all be all. There are lots of ways to do this. And I think it's also about shared power, of not this hierarchy, but I'm powering with people instead of assuming that I'm the expert. It's, my clients, they bring their own wisdom. And so how do we partner together and collaborate rather than, well, I'm the expert and you're the student? It's like, no, we've got to even the playing field here, because that person, when that power dynamic is more balanced, then that does create a space for people to ask questions, to voice things of like, this doesn't quite work for me. But that's really hard to do, to speak up in spaces, whether it's in one-on-one or in a group environment, where the persona is, well, I'm the expert, just do what I say. And there's a lot of that, and not just in online business coaching, but it's the world we live in. And I think that also has to shift as well, so that then people's voices are supported when they are speaking up.
Absolutely love that. And I think it really feels like approaching things from a place of like autonomous support. Like, you're an autonomous person. I recognize that you are a capable adult. And I think that goes such a long way in building trust, and then building like the opportunity for collaboration together. And that's what I want my client relationships to be like, right? Like, I don't want to be a dictator, like pointing my finger at them and giving them orders and then having them march. Like, that's not what I dream of building. And again, if that is what you dream of building, that's a you thing. So then, like, okay, then this episode is probably irrelevant, right? But like, I think that it's interesting because I do see a lot of like great things, like you've talked about, Anna, on the relation or on the internet, of like normalizing things. But I think also I have seen people, especially coaches, and this is where like the business coaching space just gets so nasty so quickly, but like people who will make posts about like, if you're 5 minutes late, and I'm sorry to harp on the late thing, but like if you're 5 minutes late to our Zoom call, then like I already write off that I'm not going to collaborate with that person. I'm not going to work with that person. It's unprofessional. It's a disrespect of my time and whatever. And I think that always feels frustrating to me because I'm like, didn't I leave the corporate rat race to get away from the judgment and the shame? Like, I recognize that you're an autonomous person, and like there's someone who registered for this session who did not show up and did not tell me they were coming. Am I assuming that that person disrespects me, doesn't care about our time, doesn't care about my podcast? No. I mean, I actually do assume that it's not the most important part of her day because, like, I mean, it shouldn't be, right? Like, I'm sure there's more important things in her life than this episode, but also, which is good, but also, my assumption is that, like, she forgot something happened. She has other things going on, whatever it is, whatever. I mean, I can just be okay with that and like give love and grace and like move on with my time. It doesn't have to be like and you're blacklisted, like you can no longer be part of this podcast. Like, no, I mean, not at all. So, anyways, I think like that's an easy thing. And I think another example for me that's interesting is I also teach part-time online at my local university, and I have a very lenient late policy, which is as long as you turn in the work to me before final grades are due to the department at the end of the term, you have the opportunity to earn full credit. It is so much more important to me that you get value out of a course you paid for than for me to like trick you with deadlines or whatever. Similarly, if somebody takes a quiz in that course, which I don't have control over whether or not there's quizzes, because I probably wouldn't include them if it was up to me. That's a department thing. But if somebody takes a quiz and then sends me an email and says like, hey, I got this one wrong, here's why I answered the way I did, but like, can you explain to me why that's incorrect? Then unless it is incorrect and I can then explain to them, I will say, you know what? I totally understand where you're coming from and I can appreciate this perspective. And what you've demonstrated is that you understand the course material. So I'm not interested in trapping you with a multiple choice test. I'll just give you credit. Have a nice day. Like, it's not a big deal. And I had a fellow professor say to me, like, well, if you just accept late work endlessly, what lesson do you think you're teaching them for after they finish this degree? And I said, well, I hope the lesson I'm teaching them is that if you just give each other a little bit of grace, that then it will return to you. Like, that's what I hope. I hope that I help make the world a better place because we all just pass it forward and like just be more graceful with each other. So yeah, anyways, that's like, those are the things that are coming up for me, is just like, imagine if you just were patient. But I think it's easy to slip into, though. I will say it's easy to slip into that mentality of like, I help people produce podcasts. That means that a big part of what I do is collect their episodes from them in the raw recording so I can edit them on time so that I can get them posted to the internet, right? By their regular day. If they don't meet the deadline to get it posted by their regular day, that is not really my problem. That's up to them, how important that is to them. Now, it's been easy for me to get frustrated when there's a situation because we have a workflow that I have to be able to turn it around, right? That to get frustrated when somebody's consistently late or just doesn't ever send it and I'm constantly having to chase them down. You could say this with invoices too. That's really common in business, right? Chasing down invoices. It can be really annoying and we can feel like, I don't want to have to chase you for this information. But also, when we find ourselves thinking that of like, essentially, this isn't in my job description, what if we just pause and ask, like, what if it could look different? How else could this look? How else could this look? That might be more helpful for this person. Like, how could we approach this differently? I don't know.
Yeah.
Get creative.
In that case, it's like, what kind of timeline do they need? Because I hear you, and it's this tricky place of, and I've approached this with team members, myself, with clients, of where's the space for accommodations? And also I've got to honor my own nervous system. Like I had a program and it's like they could submit things until this certain date to get the certificate of completion. And I did say, I was like, and if you get everything in at the very like last second, it's going to take me longer because I'm going to be overwhelmed. And so what would help me to help you is like, let's work together. But there is clear communication of there is a deadline because I don't have the capacity, this large window of time. Like my brain can't do that, but I can do a short container. But I think sorry, total ADHD, like squirrel moment. Let me come back too. But there's that balance of providing accommodations, and also, is it creating more work for myself? And I don't have the capacity to do that. And that's where it gets tricky. I don't have a solution for that. But I think, well, maybe the solution is, hey, let's have a conversation and see what we can figure out together. Because I've also got to honor my nervous system, my brain, my capacity, as do you. And we might have to renegotiate on some things, putting some boundaries in places. But I think maybe the key is it's not just this black and white, this is how we're doing it and it's going to work for everybody. And there can be so much flexibility that it's just unsustainable. And so I don't know where that happy
I
medium
think
is.
that comes up for me a lot in parenting. So, I mean, and I just feel like it's kind of related, because I think like treating your kids, no matter how old they are, as autonomous people. Now, of course, if they're an infant, they're not autonomous, but treating your kids as autonomous people is, I think, kind of a radical concept, but I believe in it. Now, my kids are over 20, so they're definitely autonomous in theory, but there are things that, like, for example, like, you have to remember to shut the fridge door. You have to remember to put the milk back in the fridge. You have to remember to lock the door. Like, these are just random things that have come up over the years, right? And it's not an option to not do it. Like, it's not a choice. So then if it's truly like, your brain doesn't register that that's the next task that needs to be done, then we have to come up with a workaround to make sure that the things that need to happen still happen. We have to be able to do that. And honestly, not just in our own household, but if you're going to hold any kind of job, you have to be able to find a way to create workarounds to work for yourself. So whether you have to set reminders on I set reminders on my phone to remember to take medicine. So maybe it's something that you can set a reminder for. Maybe it's something that we can put like a fluorescent paper up somewhere at eye level that you're going to see it, and we change out the color every however many days. Like, whatever it is that needs to be done so that you have the ability to navigate accommodating where your brain doesn't cooperate with like structure. Yeah.
Yep. And it's something that you're talking that reminded me, Sarah, of like talking about, I personally feel like talking about not only the expectations, how things are going to work out, and the consequences. And I feel like, and not consequences in a negative way, but understanding that if you are not following something through, this is what's going to happen. And kind of as leaders, as the coach, or as the guide of the client, or within our community, sometimes the community does not have that foresight to be able to know, okay, if this happens, that's what's going to lead to, right? And understanding the consequences to us personally, to what's going to happen to the workflow. I also used to produce podcasts, so I even produce myself. So I know exactly what you're talking about, how that can really complicate the processes and adds all of that stress. And sometimes it's just a matter of the person not knowing that that was a consequence that action had, and they're like, oh my gosh, had I known, that was never on my mind, right? And so again, open communication, discussing the whole process all the way through, all of the components, all of the consequences of everything, and how we can navigate that, and just being open and creative to go through the solutions. Because I find that the absolutes especially get me a little gets me a little uncomfortable when people go, this is the way forward, this is how we see results, and people shut down, or people just say, nope, that's not for me, and they think that that's something that they can't go forward with. So just being open in general, I feel like it's more challenging in so many ways, but it's so much more rewarding when you're like, oh wow, like we were able to navigate all of these different challenges. We were way more resilient, and especially about entrepreneurship, to use and nurture our creativity like that, to use it as a challenge. I find that sometimes the joy is in that, or like, okay, like how can we find the way that's going to work for me? maybe it worked in the past, maybe it's not working anymore. How do we move forward? But not finding that that's like, oh man, like I'm going back to those negative patterns, or I'm, again, those absolutes, right? So I find that being mindful of those moments really helps us stay in that creative zone, and especially the joy that we were talking about earlier. We let a lot of times whatever is not working to steal our joy, when we can create like those little moments. And I find that as neurodivergent people, so much of our productivity, so much of our creativity really is tied to that joy. And so how much of our processes are removing that joy and putting joy at like the center of most of our work really helps us thrive. I find, I personally, I'm really leaning a lot more into the what comes naturally to me and how can I use my skills and my talents in ways that create in different ways the outcome that I want. So I mean, that to me is something that I find lately. Actually, I'm curious about you too. What are those things that for y'all were like super change, like life changing in that sense?
Well, Sarah, when you talked about like putting timers and reminders in your phone, like if it does not, and I used to joke about it, and this is like, this should have given me clues, should have, because I didn't have any knowledge of this, of like out of sight, out of mind. If I do not write it down, it does not exist. And then approaching perimenopause, which is like another fun, really fun layer on top of neurodivergence, like it's brain fog at a whole other level. Wow, it's been brutal. But like writing everything down, setting timers for everything. I mean, everything, because I will forget to go pick up my nephew from school, which happened a couple of weeks ago because I didn't put it in my phone, and everything worked out. But I was like, that's not something I really want to forget. A couple other things that I do for myself is I know what my limit is as far as the number of, if I have one-on-one clients or a number of amount of teaching I'm doing in a day. I have to limit that, because I know that if I get to the end of the day, it's like, no, my client's not going to get the best. I am completely drained. My brain is done. And then another thing I've done for years, again, before I knew why, I just knew that it felt good and it helped my productivity, is I don't do any client facing work the last week of the month. And having that little break, I don't even have the language for how awesome it is, but that's something I've done for years. And now when I look at, oh, I have only so many spoons, or whatever language you want to use for it, it's like, oh, this makes so much sense. So I created a lot of systems for years, not knowing why I needed to do things a certain way, which is very clever. I will say, like, yay us. And damn, this would have been helpful had there been someone going, okay, let me just give you a few shortcuts so you don't have to struggle with how to be on time for stuff. Like, and you like, that was a huge issue for me. I was late for everything. And something just shifted. I'm like, I don't like that feeling of being late. Like, I don't like what it does to my nervous system. And so how can what do I need? And it was putting reminders on my phone. I need to be on the road at this time, not getting ready at that time. I have to be in my car at this time. But sometimes, anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but those are just some of the things, some of the systems I've created for myself. I'm
Love
curious to hear
those.
from either of you of like, what are some of those things that you do to just help your brain stay focused, to get things done, follow through, things like that?
Yeah. I think reminders, and I heard so much about time blocking because my calendar is my life as far as like appointments go. And so I've heard so much about time blocking, and I thought, oh, I like the concept of this, like putting even tasks on a calendar. And it didn't work for me because what happens is I rebel against myself more than anyone else. So if somebody else
Ma'am.
has an expectation of me, I will meet it. But if it's an expectation of myself, I'll break it so easily. So I like meal planning doesn't really work for me because I will eat anything except the meal that I planned. I don't want it. I reject it. I can't do it. So I've had to find like workarounds for things like that. So for example, with meal planning, we get like 5 to 7 meals at a time that are all things that we love. And we have the ingredients to make those. And then we have like a whiteboard on the fridge, and it's like, here are your choices. And then when those start to get narrowed down, we just buy 5 to 7 more, right? So then it's like at any given time, we've got at least 5 choices, right? And that helps a lot. I think so. Yeah, exploring like what does and doesn't work. But perimenopause, I want to like say that's it's such an interesting thing because I've just started having perimenopausal symptoms within the past year. And my mom's the one who pointed it out to me because she's the same age when she started having symptoms herself. But it's like, for the first time, I have concentration issues. I have like starting too many things at once. So like that kind of like too many tabs open type of ADHD issue. I've never struggled with that until within the last year. And so that's an interesting new thing, is starting to realize like also your brain changes. So even when you find things that work, like staying aware of, hey, this isn't working for me. What else could I do? And to your point, Anna, of the consequences of your actions, I think playing that through from an autonomous standpoint, if it's a parenting or a client perspective, I think you can, and I'm sorry to compare the two because like client work is not parenting, but it can feel like it. But I think approaching that person as an autonomous person and letting them walk through, like they may not know what the consequences are as far as how it affects you, so then you can share that, but like having them walk through what are the consequences of this. And then also for myself, and consequences is such a loaded word, but I think like what will happen. And so to your point, Angela, of I need to be in the car by this time, sometimes on that morning of, I stop and I ask myself, what if I'm not? What if I'm not in the car at this time? Is this something I can go to late? What will happen if I show up late? What might that look like? Would it be better for me to not go at all? Is it more of a problem for me to not go at all last minute? Or is it like, will I be missed? Or is it more of a problem for me to be late? Like, what are the things here? Like, really let me play that out and like actually walk through that and then give myself permission to make different choices. And then one more for me is my calendar, which is to your point about not doing a certain kind of like task 1 week of the month. So I started last year doing a no meeting week every month where I said, do not take meetings. My Zoom calendar is like insane. So 1 meeting a week, no Zoom. And the idea of that originally was so I could get caught up on other work. But what it actually turned into is like, that's a week I rest. That's a week I go see people in person. Like, okay. And at first I was hard on myself about that, but it's like, no, I mean, you need that too. So now that's turned into, I try to do 2 no meeting weeks a month now, starting in 2025. It's not perfect, but that's what I try to do. And I also don't take meetings on Mondays or Fridays. So I started that last year, and that's really helpful because then I don't have Sunday scaries, because Monday is not going to be a day of meetings. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are then my core meeting days twice a month. And last year it was crazy and chaotic and whatever. It was just any kind of meeting could be on any of those 3 days. And what I found is that I dreaded a certain kind of meeting depending on my mood that day. So I'd wake up and be like, well, I'm recording my podcast. I'm excited about that. But then I have a client meeting. I'm dreading it. Why? I like my clients and I like my work. So this year I've started trying. Tuesdays are for my team. Wednesdays are for Big Brave Business. Thursdays are for my clients. And that's it. So I have podcasts all day today. And some people think that's nuts because we're having like big, brave conversations all day. So literally, like, I haven't even taken a bio break since like 10:30 this morning, but I just am having big, brave business conversations all day with incredible people that like push me. And you know what? I love this day. I love this day. And then tomorrow I'm like, okay, I'm in client mode. So now I get to be like, all day, I'm just in podcast world. Like we're just talking podcast strategy and like what's going on with my clients. And then I can just be happy about that. That's been so helpful. So the lack of task switching has been surprisingly helpful for me. I didn't expect to need that, but man, it's been great. So I think the last thing I would just add is experiment. Because some of this stuff is not stuff I knew I needed, quote unquote. I was masking or coping or dealing with things because I had to. And so I made it work. But then like just trying stuff to see like, what happens if I make my no meeting week 2 weeks? What happens? Like, is that realistic? How does it feel? And it's like, actually, it's like amazing because one of those weeks ends up being more geared toward rest. And one of those weeks ends up being massive project, like massive action. And that feels great. And then I'm so motivated to go into a meeting week because I miss everyone because I haven't been on Zoom, right? So like anyways, just experimenting with things I think is also helpful. But anyways, who else? What else?
I love
I
that.
I love that. That's awesome. This is where I wanted to ask that question because I was like, I want to know. I feel like the more we know, the more we see the possibilities. And basically your way of coping is a lot of like allowing yourself agency, flexibility, and testing. And I love that because I feel like as someone who has a brain that wants to try all the things, yet sometimes we don't have the diligency to actually stick the course. One thing that really helped for me was always remembering my why and having visual reminders. Again, to
Mm.
your point, Angela, like if it's not in front of me, I don't see it. But like that act as little triggers, positive triggers to go, remember this is what you're doing, why you're doing, because we can get in the cycle of the shoulds. And I don't, I thought I was not a perfectionist. I have high work ethics and they're masked as perfectionism, but okay, whatever. And then I realized that I was drowning in the shoulds. And so having like those like little bits, I have like my vision board to my right and then my like calendar for the year on my left. And so I have like some keywords in front of me, like plus profit. It reminds me to keep playing, but focusing on making a business that is sustainable. And to me, and like visual space, like I have an office that I love coming to. So I love interior design. So having things that in my office I look and I have paintings of either female artists or that have women designed on them. So basically I look and I'm like, yes, women. I'm surrounded by the female energy. And it reminds me to stay the course because I am working primarily with women, underrepresented communities, multilinguals. And I know that I don't find that is like a big deal when I show up. It's just kind of like, I'm just showing up. But I know that for those who struggle with that analysis paralysis, that imposter syndrome that comes hand in hand with being neurodivergent, sorry, and all of the fears of the like, all the endless possibilities, where do we start? I know that by me showing up, helps other people to show up. So, and I know that we can model, others model from us. So I feel like doing the things that we want people to do is a hack in a way to like, oh, I'm living what I say that I believe in. And to me, my sets of beliefs is super important to me. So I find that it's a hack to do, okay, I said that I want my audience to show up more frequently. So let me show up. So modeling that is, it's kind of like a weird hack, but I think that personally for me, I'm not coming out of, it's not out of character, is not wrong, because I'm doing all of these things. So it helps me whenever I have to do something that feels a little more difficult. I have those reminders that like, I've done all of these things. You can do hard things. That has an expression that has stayed top of mind for the past month and a half, is just reminding ourselves that everything is temporary, nothing is permanent, and that we have agency. And sometimes when we have too many projects, the tabs, I close them now. I heard someone talk about it. There was this girl that was lady, should I say, like girl, because in like girl, like in a cute kind of like context. I'm not demeaning anyone, but she was like, close the tabs. If there's visual clutter, your brain will be cluttered. And I was like, so now when I want to focus, I close all the tabs,
Yes.
but the one that I need to work in. But then I need to open two more because I'm always researching to do whatever I need to do. But I'm like, this needs to be open to do the thing. So those are my ones.
Yeah. I think clearing the visual clutter is so good. And I do that on my desk too. Like sometimes when I notice I can't focus, I'm like, what if I cleaned my desk off right now? Which is a distractive action because it's not what I came to set out to do. But it also is like just so much easier. I love that. And yeah, I think when I'm closing tabs, I think all the time, how easy is this to reopen? And if the answer is it's in your bookmarks bar, you can just close it. Like it's fine. It's fine.
Yes.
Just close
Speaking
it.
of desks, I want to like, I have a visual aid. I heard this from I ran an unmasked call series, but put trays like of like for things to be contained. And my brain just works so much better because it's like, I want to have access to this stuff because if it's not in front of me, I'll forget that I have it and then I'll have to go find it. But I just have these little containers. Like I have one on my nightstand. I have them in my bathroom. And that one thing has just helped because then I have a place to put it. and I know where to find it instead of, oh, I know I have this somewhere. Where did I put that?
Oh,
No, it's in
obsessed with
my
that.
thing. It's in my Post-it note. Like such a simple hack, but it has created
Oh,
so much. One, I love organizing containers,
yes.
but it's like my brain knows what to do with that instead of, I don't know where to put this. And then it just goes into a pile. And then the pile accumulates and that
That's
drives me
great.
nuts, but it's too overwhelming to attack the pile. And that vicious cycle repeats. So anyway, just I wanted to share that. Just get
That
some
is a
great
great one.
containers.
I love it. And I'm looking around and I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, it really helps.
So I love this and I adore both of you. This has been a really fun conversation and a good combination. So thank you for being here. And if you're listening and you want to connect with either Anna or Angela, their bio and links are in the description or the show notes of the episode. So you can definitely like learn more about us and connect with us. And if you want to share some of your hacks for how you've worked around, we definitely want to hear them. So slide into the DMs. We would love to hear it. Thank you so, so much for being here. To you listening, thank you so much for being here. And we'll see you next week.